You're listening to the Crowdfunding Nerds podcast, a podcast that will help you succeed before, during, and after your crowdfunding event. And now, here is your host, Andrew Lowen.
Welcome to Crowdfunding Nerds, a podcast about crowdfunding. I am your host, Andrew Lowen. I am joined, as always, by faithful Richard, the SEO marketing wizard, and sexy Irish, faithful Sean. How are you guys doing?
Top of the morning to you.
What's up?
On today's podcast, we're going to talk about the offer. We're going to talk about what an offer is. We're going to talk about good offers, and in particular, offers as it relates to crowdfunding, but not completely, because even as a crowdfunder, you need to think ahead to things like retail, distribution, and a lot of other things, selling on your website, and so on and so forth. So we're going to break down an offer, what makes a great offer, where people go wrong, and we're going to talk about this from a marketing perspective. We're even going to get into some manufacturing and setting yourself up for success there. Really, it's all about what I, as a marketer, want to see that you've done with your manufacturing and the things that will help us as, or you as, marketing your own game or product when it comes time for that all-important crowdfunding launch day. So in the meantime, I just built a new computer this week because it's the holidays. I decided to empty my bank account completely on a new computer because that's what you have to do. You can't just buy a mid-grade machine. You have to go all out everywhere you can. And I decided to build it myself, which was, I'm not sure if it was a good idea or not, but I finally put all the pieces together and I turned it on and it didn't smoke, but it didn't start. So I was kind of in the middle there. I didn't ruin everything that I had created, but I think that my hard drive is just not being recognized. So that's going to be fun to figure out. It's like, it was just so anticlimactic. I hit the button. I saw all the beautiful lights show, the RGB lights and everything, and then nothing. Have you guys ever built a computer before?
I think I've built all my computers. So I don't know about Richard.
Yeah, they're pretty easy. I just think you're maybe not nerdy enough, Andrew.
I am working on the nerdness. I guess
only the hardcore nerds know how to build computers, right?
I know. I guess I'm getting rusty on my nerdiness. I am wearing a leather jacket right now, so I have a lot of cool guy going on right now. And
yes, +1 to your cool constitution.
That's right.
Anyway, I also want to bring up that earlier this week there was a great article in The Guardian, and they are talking about how comics are coming to Kickstarter. They said that this year so far, about $22 million has been raised in comic projects, and even Keanu Reeves did a comic book Kickstarter, and he made, I think it was 1.45 million on his comic Berserker, BRZRKR. What do you guys think about comics and Kickstarter? I used to be a comic book reader myself, but I'm just, it's just not something. I don't know. I can't really see much profit in comics, but
yeah, that's curious because I thought, I've always seen graphic novels or comic books on Kickstarter, and it's usually been a smaller niche. Board games would make like I could be completely off base with this, but like 170 to 200 million, and comics would be, right around like 10 million. And that's what I thought. And then as soon as you brought up the Keanu Reeves thing, dude, that guy made $1.5 million on a comic book Kickstarter. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think, Kickstarter is quite a visual platform. So it makes sense that that's happening. I suppose comics haven't died. They're still going. It looks interesting that that's moving forward on the platform.
Comics are, of course, were the precursor to games and that kind of thing. So every major distributor that distributes board games and whatnot started in comics. That was where they started. Alliance is a big one. It's just the board games of Alliance is just a division of a larger comic distributor. And because when they made money with comics, they diversified and that kind of thing.
They say total Kickstarter projects since it started has been 10,000 comic book projects to the tune of $127 million. And it's interesting because Marvel and DC puts out about 850 issues a year. So if you calculate it, Kickstarter actually might be out publishing Marvel and
Wow.
DC.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive that 127 million total, and comics have generated $22 million so far in 2020. So that's I want to say about a fifth of the money raised in comics in all time was raised, I guess in the last year, right?
And I think it's going to keep going. I think comics are getting their their mojo back. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. Well,
But another thing that why people are going to Kickstarter is apparently it's still a very competitive market for those that are trying, and it's hard to get a new product into a large publisher. These publishers are pretty closed on what they offer. It's very specific on what they want, and they rarely seem to rarely add new comics to their publishing route.
what is so interesting about Kickstarter is that no matter if it's a comic or a game or what, you are proving that there is a market for this product. And so, what I find most interesting is how major publishers are contacting people after a successful campaign and then asking to publish their comics, which is really curious. Normally with a board game, let's say, if you run a Kickstarter for your own board game, you are the publisher. Or if somebody runs a Kickstarter, it's usually the publisher that runs that Kickstarter. But a fan will run a Kickstarter, and then a publisher will come to them after a successful Kickstarter that proves that there's interest in a market for this, and they will offer to publish. And that's curious. You can have a great idea, and prove it on Kickstarter. I think that is, to me, what Kickstarter is all about in the end, is that you are proving that there's a market for your product.
It all comes down to one single thing: the offer. And guess what? That's our topic today. So I think we should start rolling it
That
out.
was an amazing segue, SEO marketing wizard Richard. So yeah, let's talk about an offer. What is an offer?
The offer is really about framing. It's about emphasizing what is important and de-emphasizing what is not so important to your customer. So instead of presenting all the information, you're highlighting very specific information that your customer will actually care about. So that is the offer.
It's a great point. You're not building a product for every single person on the whole planet. You're building a product for a niche that is going to be incredibly passionate about said product, right?
Well, from my standpoint, the guy who likes to buy stuff and doesn't sell Kickstarter things, the offer is it's what makes me buy.
Yeah, so the offer is much more than just the price of the product, right? It's the overall what's included for the price, the value proposition. You're telling me that, I should pay $50 for a product. Tell me why the product is well worth that, and show me others that prove it so. Every bit of your Kickstarter story is the offer. It's all about the offer, what it is, what's inside the box, why it costs that, social proof, others reviewing your product saying that, hey, the offer is great because I liked this about, the game or whatever. Let's get really specific. Let's start with the price. What are the elements of an offer in relation to price?
Well, one thing about price is you need to make sure that your price is competitive. Kickstarter is pretty competitive these days. Also, people, when they look at the price of your product, they sort of compare it to like when they're shopping in other places. So for example, if an average price of a board game at your local retail store is like $60, then you're expecting to pay $60 for a board game that's similar, or on Kickstarter, even less. If the Kickstarter is more than that average price, then they need to be offering something above and beyond what a retail store offers or what you perceive as the value of that
That's
game.
right. So the amount of money that you're asking for in your various pledge tier, there's a lot that kind of goes into that number. They'll look at the number and say, oh, it's $50 or it's $20 or it's $120, whatever it is. And then they'll go look at the components and everything else to determine if you are charging fairly, right? So fairness, I believe, is a huge component of that number, but it's not the only number in Kickstarter. You've got your funding goal, you've got your shipping amount, you've got kind of the total package of price. What is it if, you can buy the base game for $70, but if you want the whole experience, then you need to pay $9,000. It's one of those things that, you need to, as a backer, I've backed, I guess I'm in the low three figures now, for board game projects that I've backed. The first thing that I look at personally is not just what is the price of the base game, but what is the price of the all-in? What's the price of the real edition? I mean, we don't go to Kickstarter and back a product that we expect to receive in 18 months because I can get the standee version. Like, I want the miniatures, I want the blinged out components and that kind of thing. So I want to know, what am I really in for?
Would you mind me asking then, of all the things you've backed on Kickstarter, which one in your mind stands out as the most disappointing? Because I suppose if it's the most disappointing, then it means the offer was the least effective. So is anything in particular that stands out, that something you backed on Kickstarter was the most disappointing because the offer failed, essentially?
Well, there are horror stories. I don't want to name products that failed because the high profile products that failed, I think that those people are the most likely one to sue me. So I feel like, they failed because of bad management of the funds. And there are products out there that I have backed and I have not received a reward. And that is by far the most disappointing thing. So it was like a $20 product, solo only game, and it was something I really looked forward to. And then they asked me to pay more money, because shipping was not covered. And then I pay more money and I still don't get my product. Oh, so frustrated about that situation. And I know, at least 20,000 others were just as frustrated, or, a percentage of others that didn't get deliveries while the other percentage did.
And is there any warning signs? Is there anything that you could have looked at, or is that just part of the package, that sometimes people aren't able to fulfill their promises?
That's a great point. It is a huge part of the offer. Is, are you able to deliver on your promise? And I have had the experience, we'll call it a good vibe or a bad vibe based on things that people say. There are really simple indicators that would let me know if somebody is prepared to do this or not. One is the completeness of that story, that page on Kickstarter. If it looks complete, if it looks like you've done your homework, if it looks like you have a complete game that's been well tested and so on and so forth, then that's going to instill trust. But there's nothing that will instill more trust in you from a backer like me than if you have successfully delivered another project on time, or if you were late in your delivery, if you had kept in communication. That is very important. I would say that most of the time when something goes poorly, it usually starts with a lack of communication. So if somebody has a history of bad communication or, mismanagement of money or whatever it is, then it's an immediate turnoff.
The one thing about the offer that we sort of touched on last week was knowing the objection of the consumer. And one of the massive objection of the consumer is that fear of loss, right? It's buyer's remorse. Nobody wants to buy something and then regret that purchasing decision. So you as a business person have to get into the mind of your customer and what possibly could be their fears of backing this project, and what can I do to mitigate those fears? Can I offer something like a money back guarantee? If this doesn't happen, we'll give you a refund. What can you leverage that can mitigate those fears for the consumer so that they can have greater trust in you, that you can actually fulfill your promise?
Absolutely. The money back guarantee is actually something that I've seen Stonemaier Games do. When Jamie Stegmaier was still on Kickstarter, he would have a money back guarantee. I think that it's not as common of a thing to do the money back guarantee, although that is very popular when you get to retail level. If they buy something, don't like it, they can always return it. And so it makes it easier to part with the money because they know that they always have the recourse of just returning it, right? The number one thing that a Kickstarter campaign page will do that will instill trust in me is show me the rule book. I want to see the rules. I want to be able to read through it and see that it's a coherent, product that looks well tested and is clear and so on. Give me the ability to play it on Tabletop Simulator if I want. show me a playthrough of the game where someone else is playing it so that I can look at the combat or the turn, and I want to see if it's a game that I might like, of course. But in addition to that, I'll be able to see if it's something that looks well tested. A lot of games have really sold me, on themselves without even looking at a review video. I've been sold just knowing that the rules are accessible. Like, I could click on this link and look at the rules if I wanted. They're not embarrassed about their rules. They have a full playthrough video. I can watch it if I wanted. And do I? No. But the fact that they have it, it helps. And then, of course, reviewers, if you've got, a big name on, that's reviewed it or whatever, someone I know, then it's like, okay, well, they're obviously not embarrassed to show it because this popular reviewer has reviewed it and given an opinion and so on, and they're sharing it on their Kickstarter page. So I'm guessing that it's positive, and that's another positive. What I'm talking about at the moment, I call hygiene factors. Things that don't necessarily help you a ton, but they dramatically hurt your chances of me backing your campaign if you don't have them. If I can't verify that offer is, if I'm not getting more value than the money that I'm paying, then I'm not going to buy it, right? And so all of those things add up.
So Richard, what about you? Do you have any buyer's remorse from Kickstarter?
Actually, might have been really good. There's one Kickstarter project that I saw that I was actually thinking about getting, but I didn't. And it actually has to do with what Andrew was talking about, instilling trust, and what you guys were talking about a little earlier with communication. The game actually had a very, very good kickoff. It made its initial goal. It was going well, but then something happened between the project managers and the backers. And I don't know if it's miscommunication or what, but then it became like a big issue, and all these backers started pulling out of your campaign. A lot of people, don't realize this, but those pledges actually, if the campaign has not ended, can pull out at any time. So even if you've had a great start, if you don't maintain your communication and trust throughout the entire project, you have a chance of losing some of those backers.
Absolutely, and they can leave in droves. In fact, this was probably a year ago now, but I worked for a particular client that I'll leave nameless, and they went live on their Kickstarter. It was a very miniature heavy campaign, and it had a lot of hype behind it. And they raised like 60 grand in a few hours when they launched, which was more than their funding goal. And it was, 150% of their funding goal. And, at least in the first day, it was over 60K. And then they started leveling off pretty hard. The campaign really stalled, and the reason that it kind of stalled was because they didn't have any gameplay footage. They had a lot of, the initial people. Oh, and of course, they had an early bird. We have to talk about early birds and what that does to people that catch your product later. But they had an early bird special. It was $10 off if you backed in the first 24 hours. They had a ton of people back early, and then people found it after the first 24 hours, said, "Oh, I didn't get the early bird. You're asking me to pay more for the same product that these people paid $10 less?" And that kind of offended people and really stunted their growth after that 24-hour mark. And then of course the people that jumped in for the early bird, as soon as they found the new hotness, they didn't do a ton of research. You had some people that were just hardcore fans and were going to back no matter what, but they didn't. I need to back now because I have 30 days to decide, or 24, whatever it was, the length of the campaign, to actually decide if I want this product. They ended up just backing without thinking. It's like, I want the discount. I want to lock in the discount. So I'm just going to back right now so I get that early bird, and then I'll investigate later. What always happens is if somebody backs your campaign without doing any research, unless it's like the hype train has left the station and they're backing because everyone's backing, like a Gloomhaven or a Frosthaven, if they're backing because of the early bird, then you risk them jumping ship when another product comes out that they want more. And because they didn't really research your product very much before they actually backed it to lock in that discount, there's not really a whole lot that they remember about why they should back yours instead of the next hotness that comes out. And so that's a real negative. And the conclusion of that campaign, they started at 60K within the first few hours. They ended after 30 days at about just over $50,000 raised total. So they had a lot of people jumping in, a lot of people backing out. And then finally, the linchpin was, I think it was 4 hours to go, or maybe the last day to go. They ended up getting a gameplay footage video, and it was not very good. It was not professionally recorded. It was very, very long. It was scripted really poorly, or not scripted at all. It looked like they had done no playtesting and so on and so forth. And I think that the people who ended up spending, over 50K, all the backers that brought it to life, that product to life, which I don't know, they haven't delivered yet, and I'm not sure if they will. But I mean, stuff like that happens all the time. People go to Kickstarter with a dream. They go to Kickstarter with some elements that are really, really amazing. I mean, they had amazing miniature sculpts and that kind of thing, but they didn't really think through their entire business plan. And that was pretty obvious if you were to look at that Kickstarter story page and you were to read through and scroll below that component image that was really huge with all of the amazing miniature sculpts and that kind of thing. If you were to look at the meat of the game and what it is that you did,
So what's the recourse then? What stops someone from basically going on Kickstarter and feeding everyone a bunch of lies, getting a bunch of pledges, and then disappearing somewhere with everyone's money? Is there any type of recourse built into Kickstarter to stop that from happening?
So the Securities and Exchange Commission, if you raise enough money on Kickstarter and then you escape to Hawaii, they will come after you. We have had cases where in the distant past where people have lost their house. We've had cases where, people have, disappeared and then later gone to jail. The backers in the end are most oftentimes left holding an empty bag. While that is less common on Kickstarter, I'm pleased to say is not super common on Kickstarter. It does happen, and you do run the risk of losing out, right? And so as a backer, that, going back to that buyer's remorse, we want to make sure that we actually get the product that we're promised. And so that's a huge component of the offer, is convincing me that you are, not me as in Andrew, but me as in, backer, miscellaneous backer that's going to pay you whatever for your product. I just need to know that it's going to deliver. And so half of the objection that is going on inside my head is I'm reading what you say. I say, oh, this looks good. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe what you're saying is true. That's the conversation in my head that's happening as a backer. And the Kickstarter story, the entirety of the Kickstarter story is to say that, oh, actually it is true, because look at, the game is awesome because the reviewer says it's awesome, or these quotes say it's awesome, or look at, it's so awesome that we're giving you the rulebook, the tabletop simulator, the full playthrough video, because we're confident that you will think it's awesome.
Now, when you talk about delivering on your promise, I've noticed that some of the Kickstarters actually have, they actually list a general date of when they're shipping out. Do you think that's beneficial, or do you think it might be harmful? Because I know a lot of companies also delay the release of their games because, things change or whatnot. What are your views on that?
Well, the standard is that whatever you think it is, add 6 months. And if you have miniatures, add 9 months instead. You want to be really, really safe on the date. There's one campaign, a company that I think does a really great job with managing backer expectations. And that's, I feel like if it's a positive, I'd be happy to, name names. But Sky Kingdom Games, I think, does a really great job with this. They're a more youthful publisher that has published and successfully delivered 2 products and is on a third one that's a pretty large one. It's actually the first product that we marketed for Kickstarter, which was the Isofarian Guard, and a board game. And they probably won't hit the delivery date on time, but they're doing a really great job managing expectations during the midst of that whole process.
In fact, to me as a backer, anything over a year is actually a turnoff for me. From my perspective, just being a buyer of games and whatnot, if it's more than a year, I just feel like, sounds like they're not even close to being ready.
It's definitely going to factor into the equation that goes on inside your head. Like, okay, the shipping date's really far. I don't like that, but the price is good. The game looks fun. The theme looks amazing. The reviews are all great. it might lean you kind of the needle might end up leaning toward the buy anyway, despite a negative. I think that in some cases, certain projects are going to have, very expensive shipping, or maybe it'll be, some downside, but the upsides and the downsides end up getting weighed on a scale in the mind of the backer. And if the preponderance of the evidence says, I think I'll like this and I think it's worth it, then they're likely to actually back in spite of that. So, but it does factor in, really you want to present, put your best foot forward in the offer, and, realize that if you give me a disappointing answer, it's not going to, unless it's something really terrible, like we don't have a rule book, then, it's going to factor into my decision. But, to back it or follow it or not follow it anymore, or whatever, it's not going to make my decision for me. Like, oh, I'd never back a project that's 13 months or longer delivery date, right? It's just a kind of a little slight against the offer and what I'm looking at as a backer.
Yeah, I think when push comes to shove, the goal of the offer is to make customers glad they purchased from you. It is to get them to desire to make a purchase with you again in the future. You want them to have a good experience from beginning to end with engaging with your brand, with your product. And the offer helps frame and position that for people. So ideally, what you're trying to do in Kickstarter is actually serve people with your product and not simply sell it to people. And that will help you frame your offer if you think in those terms.
Yeah, one other thing is that you are part of your offer. And so, what you were saying, Sean, I think that there's a little bit of a separation between the offer, what it says on the Kickstarter story, and the way that you kind of make somebody really glad that they bought from you. I think that you as a company, the way that you respond to things going wrong, and the way that you respond to impatient backers and other things like that, you'll have a lot of opportunity to respond to frustrated backers that are frustrated at a situation that is truthfully completely normal, absolutely what you managed, how you managed expectations. People will get an itchy trigger finger and antsy about your delivery date, even though it's like 6 months from now and you're ahead of schedule by 3 months, they'll still get antsy. And I think that part of what I would consider is the offer is how you as a company have handled those types of things in the past, and even how you are actively handling them in the Kickstarter comment section. That's something that I will look at as another element that I'll look at as a fan, and also as a marketer. It's so important to me that my clients are getting back to their the people asking questions. If somebody asks a question, that's a buying signal to me. They want to know a certain thing about the game or the shipping or a clarification or whatever. If you answer them, that's really important to do that in a timely manner, because you are in essence saying, this is what type of customer service you'll receive from my company if you continue supporting me. And I think that tends to be like the unsung hero of the offer, really, is the customer service that is evident in the Kickstarter campaign. That is very important. So let's get into the price of the product. So I want to talk about price and shipping. Let's start with manufacturing. The price that you manufacture a game, you need to multiply that by 5 times what is called the landed cost. It's like 5 to 6 times the landed cost of that product in order to have a solid retail cost. So if a game that costs $8 and takes $2 to ship in is $10, your retail cost should be $50 or $49. So that's historically the way that it's always been for retail. So the supply chain works based off of that equation. If I sell it to a distributor, they're only going to buy it for 40% of the MSRP. So they're going to buy it for $20. If my cost was $10 and they're buying it for $20, then I make $10, right? Theoretically, there are other costs to factor in. But the distributor then turns around and sells it to the retailer for 50%. Total of that MSRP. So they're going to buy it from you for 20, resell it to the retailer for 25. And then the retailer, the distributor is working in maybe 500 or 1,000 or whatever unit. They're working in larger numbers. So that smaller margin is enough for them to operate. as long as they sell through all your stuff, which is a different issue. Then that retailer will buy, let's just say a case of 5 games or 12 games, whatever it is. And they will put it on their shelf and they will sell it. And the number that they will sell it at is the full MSRP, which is going to be $49 for a $10 product. If you were to say, to go to Kickstarter and say, oh, we're going to sell this thing for $30 because that's plenty of money for us or 35 or whatever. That's plenty of money for us. You're going to sell it at 35, and then that future retail channel, that future distribution and retailer interest, they're going to want to buy it from you and sell it at a pretty darn close figure to what you put it on Kickstarter for. They will not want to buy your product if you sold it on Kickstarter for 35 and yet you want to sell it in retail for 50 because that's the only way that you can be profitable on it. It's a really bad deal. The supply chain doesn't work very well. They can't buy it from, the distributor can't buy it from you for, 20 and then sell it for 25, and the retailer just doesn't have the margins to survive, to pay their rent, their employees, their lights. And the point is that you should think about manufacturing when it comes to the offer. If you can find ways to do the same thing in your game with fewer components, you're going to save on manufacturing costs. You're going to make that equation more palatable.
And I think that's key. Your offer has to really be in your mind whilst you're designing your game. Components are key to that. The less components you have, I suppose the cheaper your components, the greater your margins essentially will be. So that's something to keep in mind when you are designing your game. What I suggest is when designing your game is maybe do 3 types. Do the first type, which has all the bells and whistles. It's everything you ever wanted in a game. Then do one that is bare bones. It's just the core essentials to the game. Like if you take anything else out of this game, then it's not going to be the same game. And then do one in the middle, so that when you go to a manufacturer, you can sort of have 3 different price points that you can compare. And that will give you a better understanding of how to move forward with your game design.
The price of your game matters. I can sell more stuff if you reach that particular benchmark. If your game, instead of, $55, if you can reach $49, that's a big benchmark that more customers will buy. If you can go from $25 to $19, that's a huge benchmark that will cause more people to buy.
Because we talked about social proof and the offer and having a track record where people can see that you have already created a successful product on Kickstarter, you can deliver your promises. If you are a first-time game designer, what I suggest is that you actually design a card game, simply because it's a bit simpler. You're only dealing with one component, essentially cards and a box, and it will be a good place to start. And you'll probably cut your teeth on manufacturing and marketing and all these things, and it'll be a bit of an easier project, simply because a card game is just a lot easier to manage and has tiny manufacturing costs compared to games with lots of components, and essentially would just be a good place to start. So I think if you wanted to get into the space and you're thinking about designing a game, consider designing a card game instead of a board game for your first game.
I agree with that, actually. I think that it's a good idea to show that you can deliver before you just jump out and say, my funding goal is $500,000 for this amazing product. Just like David and Goliath, this 14-year-old kid goes and says, I can slay this 9-foot tall monster dude that's making your entire army cower. And Saul the king was like, you can't do this. You're just a 14-year-old kid. And then David responds, I'm paraphrasing, dude, I've killed a lion. I've killed a bear. Look at this lion coat and look at this bearskin hat that I've got. I can do this. Saul's like, well, I do see the proof. There is the lion coat. There is the bear hat. I don't know if you can make a bear hat, but I'm sure David had one. And then
the Russians do it, don't they?
Yeah, there you go. So that type of thing is kind of what you need to do as well. So in a lot of ways, everyone is quite unique in the way that they are able to present their offer. They're able to present their company. people always, I recommend talking about your experience. I want to know who you are. I want to know that you are able to deliver. I want to know that you are responsible as the head of your publishing studio, which might just be employees number, your employee number one and the only employee, or whether you've got, a ton of people behind you. It would be nice to know who you are and why I should trust you. And I think that's part of communicating the value of your offer is I want to understand that you can do it, and that, and that what you're doing, right? Just like I would want to understand if you're trying to sell me on this game, I would want to know that it's a good game and that you know how to make good games, right?
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to know that you're a Magic Pro player, or played games your entire life and you have this accomplishment in that game or whatever. I would like to know some of that so that I know that you at least have experience playing lots of games.
It's funny to see how much Kickstarter has evolved over the years. When Kickstarter first, when they first started, Kickstarter started. Anyway, when they first started, I mean, it was designed for people who really just had an idea. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to make a game that does this. It may have this, it may have this, I don't know. But I need money I need you to back me up so we can make it. And now it's such a competitive niche. You have to pretty much have practically a final product before you're even considered worthy to have a decent backer following.
Yeah, that is true. It is very different from what it used to be. You used to be able to have some prototype drawings and give people an idea of what it's going to look like. A lot of the time, people are just starting there quite destitute. They don't have money to hire a graphic designer, to, pay for manufacturing costs, to pay for an artist. So that's why they need your money to go to, so that they go to Kickstarter, because they need all of those things. The industry is maturing so that there are a lot of very established companies that are able to offer incredible heavy miniature campaigns, or campaigns that just look ready to go, and so in order to be competitive, you're right, you have to invest more.
One thing moving forward, if you've got a successful game on Kickstarter, one thing we talk a lot about Crowdfunding Nerds is building a community and leveraging Facebook groups or Discord channels or things like that, and building a community. If you've nurtured one of those communities, even if you've nurtured an email list, and you have a successful game, it's very important that you ask questions after your Kickstarter that can help you frame your next offer for your next game and continually get better at framing your offer. So asking such questions like, why did you buy from us? Or why did you buy from me? What was it that made the difference in what I was offering? What can I do in the future so that you would have a better experience or a more meaningful experience with us? Those types of questions will be very valuable to you from your existing customers, because it will then help you shape your future offers.
They'll also make me as a backer feel heard, like, hey, they care about what I think, so maybe I care about them. People tend to care about people that also care about them. And same is true of a business. If you as a business show that you value what your backers have to say, it's, I think, important that the publisher listens to and gives respect to their backers as valuable contributors to what it is that they're doing. In that way, you can make people fans not just of your product, which is the only thing that a new prospect is going to care about at first, but they'll eventually become fans of your company. And so whatever product you put out, they're very likely to back because they know you and they trust you and your company. Certain buyers are going to buy no matter what, because they're hardcore fans. They're followers of your company. They've seen the product from its inception. It's your mom and she loves you or whatever. She's going to buy your thing. You're going to have buyers who buy no matter what. You've got people who see your project for the very first time after it launches. Those people might be cautiously optimistic. They're going to need more convincing. And I think it would be worthwhile talking about how your offer will be perceived at different points in time, at different points in the process.
Yeah, no, for some people, you say board game, they think of snakes and ladders. So the idea of spending anything more than $10, $20 on a board game is outrageous. And other people, you say board game, they're thinking of Monopoly, right? So they're willing to spend maybe a bit more, but they're still, pretty casual, something they keep on their shelf, but don't really play too much. And again, with those types of gamers, they're also are not going to invest a great deal of time into your game. So they want to play for a maximum of 20 to 30 minutes max. And then you have people like myself and Andrew and Richard who will sit down for 6 hours happily and play a
Twilight Imperium 4th edition
mini heavy game, and that's like, and
Scythe.
I would pay $200 for like a massive board game that we would play for the rest of our lives. That's so you have to understand there's different demographics who are.
We'll probably play it once, and then it'll sit on the shelf until the expansion comes out.
Well, let's talk about those hardcore gamers. Like you said, there's always people who are going to buy your game no matter what. You got some fans, you got your family, and that's that's what Kickstarter is about. A lot of people will buy games on Kickstarter, but usually the main reason they buy games on Kickstarter is because they want to be connected to it. They want to say that they want to be proud. They want to say, I had a piece. I played a role in this game. And one thing we haven't really talked about is customized offers, where like you have dedicated buyers. What do you think about creating customized offers where it's like, oh, for this amount of money, we will allow you to name a character in the game or something like that. What are your views on that?
I think that it's a lot of potential for trouble in things like that, but it can be really successful if done properly. The first thing is, if you have 10 characters, like if you accept an extra $100 or whatever, so that an artist will do a quick portrait of someone on the warrior's face, and it'll be Sean, sexy Irish warrior Sean, then awesome. But if you have, let's say, 10 of them, and I don't mean to virtue signal or be racist here or anything like that, but if you have 10 white people that all buy and say, I need my face on the various characters, you lose out on diversity in your game, and so on and so forth. And so I think that it's possible to kind of go wrong in a lot of ways. You could also have people name items and they want to name things terrible names. I think the US Navy asked people to name their latest whatever their latest cruiser, and it was Bodie McBoatface was the winner. Like, wow, I can't believe the internet. I think they actually ended up naming like the submarine. It's like a little underwater or under like a mini sub or something that they drop in, or a research vessel that is contained on that ship that they did name Bodie McBoatface, which is hilarious.
Yeah, I think one thing about the exclusive offers is that they help quell the objection within the consumer of, I can wait. Or I can wait for this to come. I can wait for this to come to retail, or wait for that. Because you're giving the consumer a little extra something that they have to get now. If you want the extra card that it's only in the Kickstarter version, that basically is just cosmetic, doesn't add anything to the game, but you'll be able to brag to your friends, oh, I have this card, and people like to leverage things like that. Then you are answering the objection, I can wait. And we talked about Blizzard on the last episode, and that's exactly what they do. Every single game they bring out, they've got little collectibles that you can only get basically on like a special edition of the game that's during launch. And that's
I'm still proud of my mini Diablo from Classic World.
But interesting you talked about knowing your customer base, is that even big companies like Blizzard can sometimes fumble and drop the ball. One of their famous IPs, that Diablo, they one of the sort of famous failures in marketing was that they brought out a mobile game for Diablo,
only, right?
Mobile only, and their whole entire fan base are all hardcore PC gamers. So to bring out a sort of mobile game didn't sit well with them, to say the least.
Yeah, it was quite a famous scene in BlizzCon at the time.
Yeah, you've got phones. You've got phones, right?
Yeah. So actually, speaking of companies that you've got that group, kind of the mindset of buyers looking to jump in, you've got that hardcore group that I think is the core of every Kickstarter campaign, the crowd. You've got your crowd, the one that you bring that wants to buy your product no matter what. That's extremely critical. If you don't have a crowd, then in all likelihood, you're probably not going to fund, or you're not going to fund as well as you could have. You're not going to give your game the best opportunity it has to go as far as it possibly can. If you just rush to Kickstarter without a crowd, if you make a product and say, oh no, all I have to do is market it, fail. That's a big marketing fail. The day after or the day of launch, you have other people who are going to discover your project for the very first time. And they will be looking, or maybe that weren't in that hardcore group. Maybe they heard about it. They, see a review video, and then it off a popular channel, and they decide to go check your campaign out for the very first time. Those people are not going to be sold yet, right? So they're going to look at things just like we've been talking about. They're going to look at your offer and the various elements and try to make a determination as if, number one, not to back your campaign, but if this is worth investigating further. The project needs to look like a winner in order for me to care about it as a backer that's seen your project for the very first time. If it's funded, that means that if I hit the back button, I will actually get a product, right? Barring mismanagement of funds and all that. But that's almost like the most critical hygiene factor.
Well, I think there's an expression that says a great marketing plan helps a bad product fail faster, because the offer is about rightly communicating the value and framing the positives of your product and leveraging those. It's not about tricking people. With good marketing, if your product just isn't outstanding, it's really just going to fall on its face. And no amount of money at throwing into like a marketing campaign is going to help that. So that's something to be aware of.
Yes, that is so true. I have had clients, they've had products that are, 50% funded, and they say, look, I'm willing to drop $30,000 right now into Facebook ads. And I caution them, and I never allow them to do that, because it doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen where people are so passionate about their product, they want to see it come to life so badly that they're willing to lose out, and it doesn't have to be profitable. They just, at that time, they want people to experience it bad enough that they're willing to invest. And even if a product is 50% funded and then they want to drop another $1,000 to $3,000, it's not going to fix the problem. I mean, you can spend so much money on Facebook ads. Facebook is a huge media company that will take all the money that you throw at it. I guarantee you they will find a way to spend your budget. But it doesn't mean that it's going to save a sinking ship. And actually, that kind of brings me into the mindset of a company. You have to think about, if you want to be a publisher and you want to step into the space, you can't be a one product company, right? You have to have multiple products. And so the way that you behave, the way that you interact, the way that you handle the first project will reflect on your second project. And so be prepared. Know all your stuff. Read every single lesson on Jamie Stegmaier's blog. Read every lesson on James Matthew, God rest his soul, on his website. Read everything, listen to everything you can on podcasts like ours, and our crowdfundingnerds.com. Those resources, they're there for you. And there are a lot of other great resources. Gabe Barrett over at the Board Game Design Lab does a great job with helping people. And you just need to be ready with
studious.
Absolutely.
All right, fellow nerds, looks like it's time to go. Thanks for listening with us on episode 3 of the Crowdfunding Nerds. For more information about this podcast, please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/episode 3. Thanks a lot, and see you guys on the next episode.
Adios, amigos.
TTFN. Ta-ta for now.